At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's I Am Duck. Let's begin. The Silene laughed like breaking glass, and Ambassador Orla Sloane knew humanity would kill them all for it. She stood in the High Sovereign's throne hall, a cavern of metallic bone that sang with each footstep. The walls curved upward like ribs, meeting at a point loss in shadow 300 meters above. Everything here had been grown, not built, secreted by organisms the Silene had engineered over millennia. The air tasted of charged particles and recycled metal, a sterile bite in the back of the throat. 3 worlds, Sloane said. Her voice carried despite the hall's vastness. HD 164, Wolf 1061C, and Kepler 4, our most prosperous colonies. We seed them all. The High Sovereign shifted on his perch. 9 feet of avian predator regarded her with eyes that held no pupils, only shifting violet storms. His wings rustled, an upper set for maneuvering in high gravity, a lower, broader set for atmospheric flight. Each metallic feather caught light that shouldn't exist this deep in the palace. When he tilted his head, the translated Sloane's ear clicked twice before rendering his response. Continue. The translated voice boomed, though his actual sound was a series of whistles and percussive clicks. Additionally, we agreed to a permanent freeze on technological development. No new warship designs, no weapons research. We become a client state of the Imperium. Sloane kept her hands still at her sides. 20 years of diplomatic service, and she'd never offered terms this desperate. In exchange, you seize all military action against human space. The Sovereign's Council, 6 lesser Silene arranged on lower perches, clicked rapidly among themselves. One, marked by brass-colored wing edges, leaned toward the Sovereign. A client state generates more resources than ruins, Excellence, the Councillor said, the translation arriving a half-second after his whistles. The Sovereign's neck extended, a motion that in humans would be leaning forward but in Silene meant something else entirely. Tell me, Ambassador, when your species encounters, what do you call them? Rats. When you encounter rats in your dwelling, do you negotiate? We are not rats. No. The Sovereign's head tilted the other way. You breed as quickly. You infest systems not meant for you. You know the foundations of order. He spread his flight wings, a gesture of amusement, according to a briefing, that tightened a knot in Sloane's stomach. You even squeak the same when cornered. Sloane's jaw tightened. We're offering you victory without further loss of Silene lives. Your last offensive cost you 12,000. The Sovereign's laughter was a grating grind of clicks, a sound the translator refused to process. It echoed from the council, 6 more voices joining the cacophony until the bone walls vibrated with the harsh rhythm. When it finally stopped, Sloane's ears rang. Gods, the Sovereign said. 2 Silene warriors stepped forward, their tungsten talons ringing against the floor. They flanked Sloane's security detail, 2 Marines who accompanied her despite standing orders suggesting a full fire team. Excellence, the brass-winged counselor said. The Ambassador will watch. The guards moved faster than something that large should move. Sloane's Marines had time to reach for their weapons. Nothing more. Talons designed to pierce starship hull plating went through their body armor like tissue paper. Blood pooled on the singeing floor. Sloane didn't move, didn't blink. The spreading red reached her boots, and she let it. "Now," the Sovereign said, settling back onto his perch. "Are the vermin done squeaking?" The brass-winged counselor clicked something rapid. "Perhaps we should—" A sound like a thunderclap. The counselor's head snapped back, a perfect hole through his skull where the Sovereign's wing spike had extended and retracted in less than a second. "Anyone else?" the Sovereign asked. Silence. "Let her go," he continued, attention returning to Sloane. "Let her carry our answer in her silence. Let her tell her nestmates that the Silene Imperium does not negotiate with prey." Sloane looked at the blood at her boots, at her Marines who had names. Koval had 3 kids. Park collected old movies on physical media. "I'll carry your answer," she said. The journey back to human space took 6 days through folded space. Sloane spent them reviewing the recording from her implant, the laughter, the execution, the Sovereign's final dismissal. She played it over and over, until the Sovereign's laughter was etched into her memory. General Garrick Kincaid met her at the airlock, his prosthetic arm, everything below the left elbow, replaced after the Battle of Proxima, whirred softly as he saluted. The gesture was unnecessary. She was a civilian, but Kincaid had known her for 15 years. Through 3 wars and 2 failed peace accords. "That bad?" he asked. "Worse." They walked through the Anvil's corridors in silence. The battle station was humanity's mobile command center, a moon-sized amalgamation of armor plating and weapon systems. It could eclipse small planets. It was still outgunned 3-1 by any Silene dreadnought. The war room was already full when they arrived. 24 of humanity's remaining military leadership, plus the Coalition Civilian Oversight Committee participating via ensemble. Sloane recognized most faces. Too many were new, replacements for those lost in the past year. "Play it," Kincaid said. Sloane activated her implant's projection mode. The throne hall materialized in the center of the room. A ghost of metallic bone and shifting light. Her own voice echoed back at her, offering worlds, offering surrender in all but name. Then came the laughter. She watched faces change as it played, watched hands curl into fists. Admiral Zhao, who'd lost her entire family on the Burrow, stood and walked to the wall, pressing her forehead against the metal. When the recording reached the execution, someone swore under their breath. When it ended, no one spoke for 30 seconds. Admiral Zhao kept her forehead pressed to the cold bulkhead, her eyes shut. "How many people have seen this?" asked Director Harrison from Earth. "Just us," Sloane said. "Keep it that way for now." Harrison's image flickered. Even Ansible struggled at this distance. "General, what are our options?" Kincaid stood, his real hand and prosthetic clasped behind his back. "Conventional warfare gives us 6 months. Maybe 8 if we evacuate the frontier colonies and consolidate." "And unconventional?" "I need to make a trip." The Kuiper Belt Research Station didn't appear on any official registry. It was listed as a defunct mining operation, one of thousands of dead rocks tumbling through the outer solar system. Kincaid's shuttle eased into the docking collar without a single jolt from the maneuvering thrusters. Dr. Pell Severin met him at the airlock, a ball bearing dancing between his fingers. His eyes had the hollow look of someone who'd been sleeping in 20-minute increments. "General, didn't expect you personally." "Didn't expect to come." Kincaid followed the scientist through sterile corridors, Everything here was functional. No decoration, no comfort, just bare metal bulkheads and functional readouts. The diplomatic solution failed. I watched the news feeds. They're saying talks are ongoing. They're saying what we need them to say. They entered Severin's lab, a space dominated by holographic displays showing molecular structures and energy field equations. What's the status, Requiem? Severin's ball bearing stopped moving. You're asking if we can deploy? I'm asking if it works. In simulation, yes. Severin manipulated the holographic model, swiping through layers of data and rotating the molecular structure with flicks of a thumb. The Silene are unique. They evolved on a heavy gravity world with an unstable transuranic element in the crust. Over millions of years, they developed a biological process to incorporate it into their skeletal structure. Makes them incredibly durable. I've seen them take railgun rounds without slowing. Right, but that incorporation requires a specific bioenergetic field. Think of it like... Severin paused, ball bearing spinning again. Like a soap bubble. The soap film is only stable because of surface tension. Disrupt that tension, bye-bye bubble. And Requiem disrupts their surface tension. At a molecular level, yes, but... Severin pulled up another display. We can't just broadcast the field. It needs massive power, precise calibration. The only way to generate it is to overclock existing shield emitters. Kincaid studied the equations he didn't fully understand. Our ships... becomes the weapon, yes. The emitters run at 300% capacity, retuned to generate the disruption field. The process is... The ball bearing stopped again. Unstable. The energy will arc back into the emitters, a runaway surge through the entire power grid. The ships generating the field will die. How many ships? For a planet? All of them. Every ship we send. Kincaid was quiet for a moment. Then, show me the rest. They spent 3 hours reviewing the technical specifications. The field radius, the power requirements, the catastrophic feedback that would destroy any ship generating it. Severin explained the kill radius calculations, his tone as level as if he were explaining orbital mechanics. Nothing will remain, he said, tapping a section of the hologram that represented a city of millions. Not even dust. One more thing, Severin said as Kincaid prepared to leave. The field doesn't just affect living tissue. Their cities, their technology, it's all bio-integrated. Uses the same stabilization principle. Meaning? When we fire this weapon, we don't just kill them. We erase them. The vote took place in a secure chamber on the anvil. Physical attendance was required. No ansibles, no recordings. Just handful of people deciding whether humanity would cross a line it could never uncross. Kincaid presented the facts without emotion. The weapons capabilities, the cost in human ships and lives. The total nature of the destruction. You're talking about genocide, Councillor Duarte said. Yes. There has to be another option. There is. We lose. They harness to extinction, like they did the Procyon, like they're doing to the Star Weavers right now. Admiral Zhao spoke up. How long would deployment take? 2 years to retrofit the fleet? Maybe 18 months if we cut standard safety redundancies. Which we don't, Director Harrison said. If we do this, we do it right. They debated for 6 hours, ethics and survival, the judgment of history, whether becoming a monster defeat a monster left anything worth saving. Finally, Harrison called for the vote. All in favor. Hands rose. 5, 6, 8. Against? 4 hands. Abstaining. Councillor Duarte raised her hand. All eyes turned to Sloane. She hadn't spoken during the entire debate. Ambassador? Harrison prompted. Sloane thought of Caval's 3 kids, of Park's movie collection, of blood on a singing floor. They laughed at the word peace, she said. Let's teach them the meaning of the word. Memorial. Her hand rose. 2 years. Severin aged 5 in those 2 years. The ball bearing he'd fidgeted with wore smooth, then developed a flat spot from constant handling. He slept in the lab more often than his quarters, surrounded by equations that grew more complex with each iteration. 6 months in, the simulations failed. It's not working, he told Kincaid over secure comm. The field dynamics at scale are an order of magnitude more complex than we projected. What do you need? Time, computational power, a miracle. Kincaid gave him all 3. The entire energy output of 3 colonies was diverted to Severin's lab. The evacuations from those colonies, when the Silene inevitably attacked them, cost 40,000 lives. 14 months in, HD-22 fell. Sloane watched from Earth as the refugee ships fled. The Silene didn't pursue. They never did. They simply took the world, converted its cities to their purpose, and waited for the next expansion cycle. We should have had defenses there, someone said during the emergency session. We did, Kincaid replied. I pulled them. Severin needed the reactor cores. The room erupted. Accusations of betrayal, of sacrificing civilians for an unproven weapon. Kincaid weathered it all, his hand still on the table. Every day we delay cost lives, he said when the shouting died down. Every day we don't deploy costs more. Pick your poison. 22 months in, Sloane gave the speech that history would remember. She stood before the Coalition Assembly, her face broadcast to every human world. She looked older. Her voice had lost its diplomatic warmth. Today I announce the Total Resource Mobilization Act. Every citizen between the ages of 18 and 55 is now subject to conscription. Every factory will convert to military production. Every scientist will report to designated research facilities. No one applauded. No one protested. They just listened. We asked for peace. We asked for coexistence. We asked for a ceasefire. She paused. They laughed. Remember that when your children asked why we became what we became, tell them they laughed. Ensign Shuri found the problem 3 days before deployment. She was young, 23, fresh from accelerated training. She'd been assigned to Severin's team to run routine simulations, the kind that had been run 10,000 times before. But Shuri had a gift for seeing patterns, for noticing when numbers didn't quite align. Dr. Severin, she stood at his workstation, tablet clutched to her chest. Busy, Ensign. It's about the power flow dynamics. Severin's ball bearing stopped mid-spin. What about them? I ran a simulation assuming combat conditions. Shield impacts, evasive maneuvers, fluctuating reactor output. She set the tablet on his desk. At full power, The emitters channel energy beyond their rated capacity. The feedback won't end by just damaging them. It will arc through the entire power grid. Severin pulled up her data. She isolated the relevant data streams, her gesture swift and certain as she peeled back layers of the simulation. His face went pale. The failsafes hold for 30 seconds, maybe 40 if we're lucky. Shuri's voice was steady, but her hands betrayed a tremor. 1 in 10 ships won't get that long. Catastrophic failure in under 15 seconds. The lab was silent for the hum of computers. Severin stared at the data, ball bearing crushing between his fingers. Your simulation assumes stable power flow, he said after a long moment. That's unrealistic in combat. Sir, I accounted for edge cases. He didn't look at her. You're modeling edge cases. We don't have time for redesign based on statistical outliers. Dr. Severin, the crews need to know. The crews know it's a one-way trip. He turned to face her, his gaze flat and cold, a scientist looking at a variable to be controlled. She took an involuntary step back. Your report is classified, Ensign. You'll delete all copies and speak of this to no one. But that's an order. She saluted and left. Severin sat alone in his lab, staring at the data she'd found. After an hour, he encrypted it and buried it in his personal files. Then he went back to work. The fleet assembled at Rally Point Zulu, the emptiest stretch of space humanity could find. 43 ships in total, everything that could be spared and retrofitted with the modified emitters. Some were proper warships. Most were freighters with guns welded to their hulls, civilian vessels drafted into humanity's final gambit. Kincaid watched from the Anvil's observation deck as they formed up. His protégé, Admiral Rebecca Torres, commanded the lead ship. She was 31, brilliant, and should have had 40 more years of service ahead of her. She volunteered, Sloane said, joining him at the window. They all did. That doesn't make it easier. No. Kincaid's prosthetic fingers tapped against the railing, a nervous habit he'd developed. It makes it harder. They stood in silence as the fleet finished forming. 43 ships, 8,000 crews, everyone a volunteer who knew they wouldn't come home. I should be with them, Kincaid said. The Coalition needs you here. The Coalition needs someone who can sleep at night. Sloane turned and studied him. The prosthetic arm was just the most visible wound. The rest were in the lines around his eyes, the grey that had crept through his hair, the way he held himself like a man carrying invisible weight. Tell me about your wife, she said. Kincaid blinked. What? You talked to her photo. I've seen you. Tell me about her. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Elise. Her name was Elise. She was a botanist on Kepler-4. Grew tomatoes that could survive in alien soil. Said she was fighting the war with vegetables. The ghost of a smile. The Xialing took the colony 6 years ago. I'm sorry. She would have hated this. What we're doing. She believed in growth. In building things. He watched the fleet begin its first fold towards Silene space. I'm about to commit genocide with the weapon she would have used to feed people. The Silene made the choice for us. Did they? Or did we make it when we expanded into their territory? When we ignored their first warnings? When we... Stop! Sloane's voice was sharp. They laughed, Garrick. They executed my Marines and laughed. Whatever started this war, we chose how it ends. The fleet's final briefing took place over comm. Sloane's image projected onto every bridge and ready room. You know what you're being asked to do, she began. No preamble, no warming up. You know the cast. You know that songs will be written about this day, but not celebrations, dirges, laments, Songs of necessity, not glory. She paused, looking into the camera. The Silene believe in the superiority of strength. Today you will teach them that humanity's strength isn't in our technology or our numbers. It's in our willingness to pay any price for survival. It's in 8,000 volunteers flying at a certain death because it means Earth's children might live. Another pause. They took our peace, our pleas, our future, so we give them the only thing left. Silence. Eternal, perfect silence. The silence of a memorial to their own arrogance. The comm flicked off. On the bridge of the lead ship, Admiral Torres turned to her crew. You heard the ambassador. Spool up the fault drives. Let's go carve our names into history. The Syl system was beautiful. 3 suns in a complex dance, painting space in shades of violet and gold. The Homeworld itself orbited in a perfect position to catch all 3 stars' light, creating dawns that lasted hours and sunsets that painted the sky in colors humans had no names for. The instant the human fleet emerged, Silene defense networks screamed alarms. On Syl, the High Sovereign received the news, and a low, satisfied clicking rumbled in his chest. 43 ships, he clicked amusement. They bring their entire remaining fleet to die at our door. Excellence, his new brass-winged advisor began, his tone measured. Perhaps we should mobilize the full defense of 43 obsolete vessels. No. The Sovereign spread both pairs of wings, a gesture that dismissed all doubt. Deploy their Sovereign's will. Let the galaxy see that a single Silene dreadnought can destroy everything humanity has to offer. The Sovereign's will was a masterpiece of bio-integrated engineering, 2 kilometers of living metal, and organic weapon systems. It could crack moons with its primary guns. It emerged from Syl's orbital defense perimeter, like a leviathan rising from the deep. On the human fleet's lead ship, Admiral Torres watched it approach. All vessels, spread into an attack arc. Emitters forward. We need 30 seconds on target once we activate. That's all. The battle began at range. The Sovereign's will opened with particle beams that carved through space, each shot arcing across 1,000,000 kilometers to punch through a freighter's spine. The human ships scattered, their inferior engines straining. The freighter Johannesburg died first, split in half by a direct hit. Then the new Mumbai, its reactor detonating in a brief sun. The Calgary lost its engines and drifted dead toward the system's edge. But the human ships kept advancing, kept spreading into their formation, a careful arc calculated by Severin to maximize the field's coverage. 20 seconds to optimal positions, Torres' tactical officer reported. The Sovereign's will accelerated, its bioengines leaving trails of exotic particles. Its secondary weapons came online, clouds of guided missiles, each one capable of tracking targets across light seconds. The human fleet's point defense did its best. Laser clusters swept space, trying to thin the missile swarm, but there were too many, moving too fast. The destroyer Prague took 19 hits and came apart like a broken toy. The Sao Paulo lost its bridge, continuing on autopilot until a second wave finished it. Smaller ships simply vanished. They one moment and debris the next. 10 seconds to position. On Earth, Kincaid stood in the war room, watching telemetry data stream in. Each ship lost was a light going out on his display. He knew their captains, their crews, had signed their commissions, had signed their death warrants. 5 seconds. In his lab, Severin sat alone, the lights off except for his workstation. Ensign Shuri's data glowed on his screen. 1 in 10 ships would fail in a bloom of plasma, maybe more. He'd made the choice to bury that knowledge, and now he would watch the price get paid. Positions achieved. All ships, activate emitters. The modified shield emitters came online in a sequence, each ship becoming a node in a massive field generation network. The power draw was immense. Reactors pushed past red line, containment field straining. On the Lagos, Ensign Shuri felt her ship shudder. She was supposed to be on Earth, her report classified and buried, but she'd volunteered for the fleet anyway, knowing what others didn't. The emitters were already glowing white-hot, visible through the hull cameras. Field generation at 60%, someone reported. The Sovereign's will noticed the energy build-up. Its commander, following standard Silene doctrine, increased fire rate. 3 more human ships died in as many seconds. But the formation held, the remaining vessels maintaining their positions, even as debris fields expanded around them. 80%! On Syl, the High Sovereign watched through remote feeds. Something was wrong. The human ships weren't maneuvering anymore, weren't even returning fire. They just hung there, generating some kind of energy field his scientists couldn't identify. "Excellence," his advisor said. "Perhaps we should—" "Quiet! 90%! The first emitter failure happened on the Boston. The energy arc jumped from the emitter ray to the main power conduits, flash boiling coolant into expanding steam. The pressure wave crushed 3 decks before the reactor containment failed. The ship became a brief star. Then the Delhi, the Stockholm, the Nairobi. But the field kept building, each remaining ship compensating, their emitters glowing like tiny suns. "Field generation complete," Admiral Torres announced, her voice carrying across the fleet comm. "All ships, you have 30 seconds before your reactors tear themselves apart." "It's been an honor." She turned to her crew, young faces, all volunteers, all knowing what came next. "Send it." From the outside, it looked like nothing at first. A distortion in space, like heat haze over summer asphalt. The field expanded from the fleet in a perfect sphere, moving at the speed of light. The Sovereign's will fired everything it had, trying to destroy the human ships before whatever they'd done could take effect. 2 more vessels exploded, their death throes adding energy to the field rather than disrupting it. Then the distortion reached the dreadnought. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the great ship's biometal hull vibrated, a low frequency at first, below perception, then rising, climbing through audible range into something beyond sound. On Syl, the High Sovereign felt it before he saw it, a tremor in his bones. His endoskeleton reinforced with the same transuranic element that made his species dominant, began to resonate. "What is—" The palace walls sang. The grown bone and metal that formed the city's architecture took up the vibration. Harmonics building on harmonics. Windows made of living crystal cracked. In his lab, Severin watched the field telemetry. "Forgive us," he whispered. The Sovereign's will came apart like a sand sculpture in a hurricane. The materials that made it nearly indestructible became its weakness, each molecule losing cohesion as the field disrupted the subatomic bonds holding them together. 2 kilometers of warship became a cloud of metallic dust in less than 3 seconds. The field kept expanding. It reached Syl's orbital defense platforms. The automated systems built with the same biointegration dissolved. Then the communication satellites, the space elevators, everything the Silene had built over millennia, gone in moments. The High Sovereign tried to speak, to give some final order, but his voice was already breaking. The resonance had reached the frequency that disrupted Silene biology itself. He felt his bone fragments, his organs liquefy, his consciousness scatter like... The field touched Syl. From space it was beautiful in its horror. The planet's atmosphere took on an opalescent quality as microscopic particles caught the light of 3 suns. The great spiral cities, each one a work of art grown over centuries, became pillars of glittering dust. Mountains carved into monuments collapsed into perfectly smooth plains. And the Silene, billions of them, experienced one moment of perfect, universal surprise before they became part of the horror. Their transformation took 4 minutes. When it was done, Syl was a sphere-fused material, its surface so smooth it reflected starlight like a mirror. No atmosphere, no features, no trace that a civilization had ever existed except the unnatural perfection of its destruction. On the human ships, the 30 seconds had passed. Admiral Torres felt the heat through the deck plating as her ship's emitters went critical. She had time to send one last message. "Fleet to Earth. Mission accomplished. Tell them we—" The valediction exploded, taking Torres and her crew with it. The remaining human ships followed in sequence, their sacrifice complete. In the end, only 3 vessels survived. Their emitters had failed early, saving them from the feedback loop but leaving them drifting, bleeding atmosphere, their crews facing a slow death in the dark. One of them was the Lagos, with Ensign Shuri on board. She'd known the odds, known her ship was likely to be in the percent that made it long enough. She spent her last minutes documenting what she'd seen, uploading it to a beacon that might, someday, be recovered. The news reached Earth in fragments. First, the telemetry data showing mission success. Then the casualty reports, 40 of 43 ships lost, only a handful of escape pods recovered from the 3 survivors. Finally, images of what Syl had become. The Coalition held an emergency session. After 10 minutes of silence, someone said, "We won." Within days, every species with faster-than-light capability knew what had happened. The Starweavers, who'd been facing extinction at Silene hands, sent a simple message. "Thank you." The Procyon refugees scattered across a dozen systems held a day of celebration that felt more like a wake. But most species reacted by fortifying their borders and silencing their deep space transmissions. The Pentari Consortium, who'd never had conflict with humanity, at once offered a non-aggression pact and favorable trade terms. The Epsilon Federation provided access to technologies they'd guarded for centuries. Even the militant Kraid, who'd conquered 15 systems, discreetly withdrew their border fleets from human space. 6 months after Syl died, representatives from 37 species gathered in the New Geneva station. Sloane stood before them, no longer an ambassador but something else, a prophet of extinction, a voice for a species that had proven it would pay any price for survival. "The Terran Coalition accepts your proposals," she said. "Trade agreements, technology transfers, mutual defense pacts, all offered from fear disguised as respect. We look forward to peaceful coexistence." The Pentari representative, a being of woven, living metal filaments that warped the air like a heat haze, communicated through modulated light patterns pulsed from its core. "What will you do with the Silene worlds?" "Nothing. They'll remain as they are, monuments to the price of arrogance. And if others settle them," Sloane's expression didn't change, "then we'll assume they're declaring war." No one challenged the claim. Kincaid and Severin met in a bar on Earth, a small place in what used to be Prague. The city had been rebuilt after the water wars, but this bar was old, predating even those conflicts. Real wood, real alcohol, real silence. They'd been sitting for an hour without speaking when Severin finally said, "I found something in the classified files today." Kincaid didn't respond, just took another sip of whiskey. "Ensign Shuri's report." Severin's hands were empty. He'd lost the ball bearing somewhere and hadn't replaced it. "She was right about the power surges. We lost ships we didn't need to lose." "She was on the Lagos." "I know." Severin stared at his untouched glass. "She volunteered even knowing what I'd hidden. even knowing she'd probably die. They all knew they'd die. Not like that. Not burning from the inside as their own ships killed them. Severin finally took a drink, grimacing at the burn. Torres lasted 6 seconds after the field activated. The telemetry shows she was trying to send coordinates for survivor pickup. Until the end. Kincaid's prosthetic hand closed around his glass hard enough to crack it. Stop! I murdered them, Garrick. Our own people. You gave them a weapon that worked. Everything else was my call. Kincaid set down his cracked glass, whiskey leaking onto the wooden bar. The delay. The rushed deployment. The acceptable losses. That's on me. They sat in silence again. Outside, Earth kept turning. Cities full of people who would never know about Ensign Shuri's report, or Admiral Torres's last 6 seconds, or the choice 2 men had made in the name of survival. What do we do now? Severin asked. We live with it. That's it? Kincaid stood, leaving credits on the bar. That's the punishment. We succeeded, so we get to live with it. Every day, every night, for whatever years we have left, we get to be the men who saved humanity. He left Severin alone in the bar, staring at his reflection in the whiskey. The dedication ceremony was broadcast on every human frequency, transmitted to every species with the capability to receive it. A single ship, the Testament, built specifically for this purpose, orbited the sphere that had been Syl. Sloane stood on the bridge, her face transmitted to the galaxy. She wore formal diplomatic attire, the same outfit she'd worn when she'd asked for peace. Behind her, through the viewports, the memorial made a slow turn, catching and reflecting starlight. By resolution of the Terran Coalition. She began, her voice level and clear. This system is hereby designated the Syl Exclusion Zone. No vessel, human or otherwise, will enter this space. No settlement will be attempted. No resources will be extracted. She paused, allowing translators across the galaxy to catch up. What remains here is a monument, not to human victory, but to the price of underestimating desperation, to the cost of choosing cruelty over compromise, to the final silence that follows laughter at an offer of peace. Another pause. Behind her, the memorial continued its rotation. Perfect and terrible. The following words will be encoded in a permanent beacon, broadcasting in all known languages until the heat death of the universe. She looked directly into the camera, and for a moment the diplomat was gone. In her place stood something harder, something that had watched her gods die and made the choice to answer laughter with annihilation. Here stood a people who laughed at a plea for peace. We asked for a truce. They laughed. Now their homeworld is a memorial. May memory be their only grave. The broadcast ended. The Testament deployed the beacon and departed, leaving Syl in silence through space. The system would remain empty for millennia to come, visited only by long-range probes from species wanting to verify the object that defied nature. Too perfect to be anything but deliberate. That an entire world could be turned to glass. That a dominant species could be erased so utterly that even their atoms were unrecognizable.